I spent most of the 50s and 60s in ministry of the Methodist Church in Alabama. 1960, I was appointed as campus pastor at Auburn University. Those were dynamic years, to say the least. 1954, I shook hands with Martin Luther King Jr. at the beginning of the Montgomery bus boycott. 1964, I shook hands with Harold Franklin, the first African-American student and the only one that year to enroll as a student in Auburn University. As I said, it was a live and vital and dynamic period of history. But when I look back today at the civil rights era in which I participated, there is another story that rises to the top. It's not all that dramatic. It wasn't a public event. In fact, no one outside of our family and a couple of young men ever knew about it. In 1962, the Methodist student movement made available integrated teams of two students that would make themselves available primarily to campus ministry settings in the South to raise and discuss the issues of civil rights. I invited two of those students, two young men, to come to Auburn. Because the motels had not yet been integrated, and we did not see this as an issue of protest, and because of finances, I invited the two students, two young men, to spend the night with us in our home. Ralph, young male student from Michigan, and Arnold, a young African American from Mississippi. They came late in the afternoon. We had a supper together. And then after the children had gone to bed, we stayed up late at night talking, telling stories, asking questions, anticipating the time with the students the following day. The next morning at breakfast, all of a sudden, out of the blue, Ruth Ann, our 4-year-old daughter, blurted out, "Daddy, Ralph is not like we are. Arnold is just like us." And I could feel the tension, the defensiveness rising in both Arnold and Ralph. Well, there's no way that I could silence Ruth Ann. Nobody ever has been able to, then or now. And so I played it straight, knowing that she probably had names confused. I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, Arnold talks just like we do. Ralph talks funny." And there it was. Whatever the distinctions there were, what made a difference to Ruth Ann was not the color of the skin. Arnold was the only one in the group that was dark. but something entirely insignificant. It's no wonder that that little girl grew up to be the loving and caring woman that she is today. Now, I tell that story for two reasons. One is as a proud father, of course. But the other is, I think that's an example of a fundamental of human relations that should play out in the struggle and the joy of civil rights. Obviously, meeting Martin Luther King Jr. had a pivotal impact on my life. And the integration of Auburn University was a historical and dramatic event. But the unconscious response from a little 4-year-old girl, I think somewhere is fundamental. I hope you will view Valerie Keller's, the young Sikh activist, video, 3 Lessons of Revolutionary Love in a Time of Rage, to get a glimpse of what grown-up love means in the world in which we live today. But I hope you will appreciate the story, my story, of a little 4-year-old girl in talking about what's different about us and what's the same. Thank you for listening.